Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I will be doing a video about the Koppieverse. But this video will be a little bit different because I will be going over the history of the FSA. I started to make this video I think in June, so this was a pretty long time. That's why I made it. Now the video won't actually release really all that much soon because I do still have to edit, which will take time, and I just like the last time I uploaded a video was 3 months ago. So like 1 month delayed between 2 of my first videos. So this third video was going to upload after 3 months. Wait. So let's start from pre-FSA time. Long before the FSA existed, there was nothing much in America, even though it was after, it was post-discoveration by Christopher Columbus. Because Christopher Columbus discovered, fucking hell, Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, and the FSA only came to be around the time that the U.S. was gained independence. So, in the 1600s, the Ming Dynasty of China came to Europe and asked people in Europe if they would want to challenge them to go to America, a race to America to see who can win it first. Which means that there are Chinese people in the Koppieverse Islands of America, by the way. It's kind of weird, but yeah. So basically, the Tuscanis of where modern-day Italy would be accepted this challenge, and the two went to war after about 2 weeks. You see, the Ming Dynasty gave them 2 weeks to prepare, and after those 2 weeks, they went there. The war started. The Tuscanis had to think about how would they, number one, win this land, and number two, not harm the people, because if you have destroyed land that you can use for anything, doing farming or building stuff or anything like that, who the fuck would want to live there? Because if you have people living in a land, then you get more money, and who doesn't love money? I'm a Jew, so I love the most. Anyways, after that, the two went to war, and the war was pretty heavy. It was very hard to win this war, especially for the Tuscanis. And that was until the Tuscanis came to the Native Americans and signed a treaty with them to help them defeat the Ming Dynasty, which is why the FSA is close friends with the Alaskan Republic, because the Alaskan Republic is not a very American nation. It does have white people in it. That's mostly because of Russian stuff. But it is led by a Native American. So what happened was, this basically formed something known as the Vespucci Empire, named after Amerigo Vespucci. The Vespucci Empire was founded in 1654, and they basically destroyed the Ming Dynasty. In America, at least, they didn't actually went to Chinese land. And they completely destroyed the Ming Dynasty there, pushing them all the way to, pushing them all the way to the Caribbean islands.
朋友是一个坚韧不拔的纪录片，在香港这座城市的设置。
And once left there, the Italians who lived there just stayed in America for about, the war was pretty long, so it was over only in 1748, and until there was about, I think, about 18 years until the FSA was actually founded. And in between those years, the Italians, the Tuscany Italians, had to live with Native Americans for a very long time. And at that time, they were still incredibly huge. They still owned some parts of Canada, and they still had a long, and I do mean long, road ahead. I guess, I don't know. Basically, by the way, the Ming Dynasty in the Koppieverse was called the KoMing Dynasty, only because it was a Koppist dynasty. Koppie did go to China for some reason, even though Asian people are not very known for their, but Koppie, I think Koppie is, I'm gonna be honest, right now China would hate Koppie, because Koppie is for freedom of expression. Koppie is all for freedom. Now, I'm not saying that the FSA is not a free country, but, because having intercourse is not really allowed in there, and it is considered a crime, there's more freedom, I would say, in the Ming Dynasty than the actual Italians. But how did the Vespucci Empire become Feddist? That's a question that I will answer. The Vespucci Empire was created because when the Italians and Native Americans started to lose, Feddist decided to intervene, since he realized that the Ming Dynasty was Koppist, and he realized that having an entire continent be Koppist would be a major problem for Feddist in the future, so he couldn't do this. He couldn't let this happen. I forgot to record this before, so I'm just going to put it in the video right now, instead of just stopping the war altogether. And when they joined the Italians, the Chinese were completely destroyed and sent all the way to the Caribbean islands, which isn't that much far away, but it is pretty far from the actual American land. The only actual land that they owned on the American peninsula, I'll say, was a little bit of modern-day Mexico, but nobody cares about that land at all. And the only reason that they owned that land was just because they wanted to attack the Vespucci Empire from there, but not enough soldiers survived the way to Mexico from the Caribbean islands. This was an attack that they were trying to do. They tried to go from the Caribbean islands to Central America, but not enough soldiers survived the way there, so the attack was basically cancelled, and now there's just I guess in modern day unoccupied Mexico, there is just a community of Chinese Koppists, say like that. After that, in 1766, so in 1766, the empire was dismembered and the people just lived there, but they didn't live in an empire. Well, I guess they kind of did, but they didn't actually do any imperial things and just decided to stay where they are because they have now won this land, and that's all they wanted to do. They just wanted to win against the Chinese, even though people didn't really know each other at that time because there was no actual technology. But 9 years later, the English came to America. And once that happened, George Washington started a Revolutionary War. But the Revolutionary War wasn't against the British rule, it was against the Italian rule. Because, the Vespucci Empire were all Italians, basically. So what happened after that was that in 1783, the Patriots finally won the war, and the FSA was established. Yeah. But when the FSA was established, it was still a big nation. They still owned some lands that would be considered in our world Canada, and still owned some lands in our world Mexico, I guess. But the Patriots slowly started returning that land to the native people of North America, using only the land that would be considered modern-day America. Around 100 years later, during the 1860s, Hoosiers decided to try and gain independence, still having Feddist beliefs, but wanting to become their own country. The FSA agreed to this, but tricked the Hoosier government and turned Indiana into a protectorate of the FSA by having incredibly high FSA military control around Hoosier borders, which included borders that weren't really bordering the FSA anymore. Because once Indiana gained independence, the FSA had already lost around 60% of all the land that the Vespucci had. Now that Indiana was also its own country, they lost around 62%. But also, in the 1880s, the FSA didn't know what to do with some of its land. So similarly to what the Chinese did, the FSA came to Europe and asked who wanted some of their land. Apparently, the Czech did. That's forming Utsadochia, a Czech-owned land in an Italian country on an American continent. And in the 1890s, the British finally started to claim more land, like the Leishti Kingdom. And upon arriving in America, the British demanded some land, as they believed George Washington basically gave them the right to own some American land, even though he was English and not British. This started a war across America, called the Feddist-British War. Even though this war wasn't against Feddist beliefs, nor was Feddism involved. Calling it the Brit-Italian War would just make it sound European, so they didn't do that. So that was all for this video. If you'd like to hear more stuff about the KPV, whether it's about the FSA, New England, or the Protectorate of Indiana, just say it down below, and I might take into consideration. Because these videos don't actually take a long time, it's just that I'm too lazy to make them, it might take a while. But, yeah. Bye-bye! Hi, please remember that the KPV is still changing in so are its countries. This means that more history is created and some history is changed. Just like sometime we discover stuff about our history, we may discover new stuff about the Koppieverse history, which means that this video may not be true in a couple of months, weeks, or even days. This is all up because the creators of the KPV, which is me and my two friends, still change stuff about the KPV and how we see it's meant to be. Like right now, the Vokla-Indonesian War is going on, and the FSA is involving in it, but because it's not technically a part of history, then I wouldn't really want to say it. And because in around 3 months, the FSA will hold elections, it's not something that I should mention, only because there isn't really a point to mention it. This was recorded about like 2 weeks after I actually made the video, and I know a lot more about the FSA than I did when I made this video, and I guess I was kind of nervous while recording it, and wasn't really ready to record it, so this is just a small message. Bye-bye!
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.